For a holiday gathering, Robert wanted to bring his assistant, Ashley, home. After he asked 3 times, I agreed. That night, Robert was unusually happy and had a few drinks. When I got up during the night, the light in the study was still on. Thinking they were discussing work matters again, I walked closer. My blood ran cold. Robert, it's definitely more exciting here at your place than in the office. Through the crack under the door, Robert was pressing his assistant hard against the bookshelves. Be a good girl, and I'll take you to the master bedroom next time. My hand trembled as I sent a message to my lawyer. Draft a divorce agreement for me. I sent the recording I had just made along with the message. And I transferred some money to the lawyer. Sorry to bother you on a holiday. Consider this overtime pay. Happy holidays. The lawyer was still awake and quickly replied. You're too kind, Sarah. I'll definitely handle this for you. Happy holidays. Glancing back at the tightly closed door, I turned and walked back to my room expressionlessly. I slept soundly all night. The next morning, as soon as I went downstairs, I saw Robert Miller and Ashley Davis in the kitchen. Elena, standing awkwardly to the side, rushed over when she saw me. Sarah, about this. I held up my hand to cut off Elena's unfinished sentence. I told her to go rest and walked directly to the dining table. Okay, if you like. Robert Miller, with a smile on his face, turned around and saw me, swallowing the rest of his sentence. You promised me, ah. Ashley Davis turned her head and saw me, letting out a shriek before dropping the spatula she was holding. Sarah. Ashley Davis bit her lower lip and looked at Robert Miller helplessly. When she saw that Robert Miller's attention wasn't on her, she pulled her gaze away with dissatisfaction. Ms. Davis is such a dedicated employee, coming as a guest and still taking over the boss's housekeeper's job. How much salary does Robert Miller pay you? If it's too little, I should make him pay more. As I said this, a gentle smile was on my face. No one could see my true emotions. Ashley Davis's eyes reddened at my words, tears welling up slightly. Mr. Miller, I told you not to interfere, you just had to mess things up. Go clean up the kitchen quickly. After breakfast, I'll take you back. Robert Miller put on a show of chewing out an employee in front of me. Then, he brought the finished breakfast and placed it in front of me. Sadie, eat while it's hot. Ashley Davis said she made this especially for you to thank you for letting her stay yesterday. I looked at the artfully arranged fried eggs and a sandwich. I pushed the plate away a little. It seemed Robert Miller was too happy cooking with his little mistress. He forgot I had an egg allergy. What's wrong, not to your taste? Robert Miller looked somewhat puzzled. At this moment, Ashley Davis, who had finished cleaning the kitchen, walked over. Sarah, I didn't know what you liked to eat, so I made it according to Mr. Miller's taste. Young, but full of schemes. She probably thought I would fall out with Robert Miller because of that suggestive remark. But I didn't respond at all. You two eat. I didn't sleep well last night and don't have much appetite. At my words, the two people in front of me changed expression to varying degrees. Are you too tired lately? After meeting Robert Miller's searching gaze for a moment, I was the first to look away. Maybe. After all, that man was too clingy. It had taken a lot of effort to convince him to wait for me a little longer. Perhaps out of guilt, Robert Miller didn't exchange a word with Ashley Davis during breakfast. He even told her to eat faster because he was in a hurry. Sadie, I'll drop her off first, then come back to pick you up. We'll go to the family estate together. I knew where Ashley Davis rented her place. Logically, it would be quicker for us to go to the family estate directly after dropping her off together. But I could also understand that Robert Miller needed to appease the little mistress he had ignored for half the morning. So I nodded in agreement. Soon after they left, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I saw the tall man standing outside. I felt a bit helpless. Have you brought up the divorce with him? After eating the breakfast Davidson brought, he seemed appeased and offered to drive me to the family estate. I didn't refuse. After only a few minutes, Robert Miller called me. Sadie, Ashley Davis has an upset stomach. I have to take her to the hospital. I won't have time to pick you up. Can you go by yourself? I had planned to pretend to care for a couple of sentences, but glancing at David Chen's look out of the corner of my eye, I didn't say anything extra. Okay, I'll go by myself. He brought her right in front of you, how can you still tolerate it? As soon as the call ended, I heard David Chen's complaint. I rubbed my temples and gently reassured him. I'm not tolerating it. Who knew he would bring her back yesterday? I'll make things clear with him after I get back from the family estate. Speaking of which, it was David Chen who told me about Robert Miller's affair. 3 months ago, David Chen suddenly returned from overseas. He also bought the house next door to mine. 2 months ago, he placed a stack of photos in front of me. They were intimate photos of Robert Miller and Ashley Davis. After you got together with him, I disappeared immediately to not be in your way. But the facts prove Robert Miller isn't a good match. Divorce him. I've been waiting for you. Since then, David Chen would often come see me when Robert Miller wasn't home. At first, I was very resistant. But now, I've gotten used to it. During this time, I also hired someone to follow Robert Miller myself. When I saw the results, which were exactly the same as David Chen's investigation, besides feeling bewildered, I didn't seem to have any other feelings. Where's Rob? Why didn't you come together? Carol, my mother-in-law, saw that Robert Miller wasn't with me and her smile immediately disappeared. I was already used to her changing expressions. As I changed my shoes, I replied, he's taking his assistant to the hospital. I don't know when he'll be here. Carol Miller was dissatisfied with my perfunctory answer. What kind of assistant requires the boss himself to take them to the hospital? Sarah, if you're going to make excuses, can't you find a more believable one? My mother-in-law was pregnant before marriage. Because she didn't want to abort the child and refused to say who the father was, she was kicked out of her family home. As a mother, Carol Miller could be said to have sacrificed everything for Robert Miller. But as a mother-in-law, her hostility towards me was more than that of most mother-in-laws towards their daughters-in-law. Everything's ready. Hurry up and cook. By the time Rob gets back, dinner will be ready. This was also a required event every year. Even though there was a chef at home, she insisted on having me cook personally during holidays. In the past, to avoid causing more conflict, I tolerated it. But now, I didn't go to the kitchen as usual but sat directly on the sofa. Who told you to sit down? There's a pile of things waiting for you in the kitchen. Carol Miller, who had never been defied before, was stunned for a few seconds before saying in a deep voice, I don't feel well. I can't cook. Hearing this, Carol Miller quickly walked over to me, her tone somewhat excited. Not feeling well? Could it be you're pregnant? Saying this, she reached out to touch my stomach. I instinctively dodged. I expected her to get angry, but she muttered to herself. Right, shouldn't touch carelessly. I'll call Dr. Roberts. Please don't bother. I'm not pregnant. Afraid. She would actually summon him. I quickly stopped her. Carol Miller turned back to look at me. Seeing that I didn't seem to be joking, the expression on her face darkened again. Not pregnant? If you're not pregnant, why are you pretending to be weak? Go cook quickly. Sighing, I had originally not intended to let Carol Miller know so early. Pulling out the intimate photos of Robert Miller and Ashley Davis, I held up my phone to Carol Miller. I know you're eager for a grandchild. Maybe this girl can fulfill your wish. Robert Miller arrived at the family estate around noon. He seemed surprised to see Carol Miller and me sitting separately on either side of the sofa. Why aren't you eating? Are you waiting for me? Seeing that Robert Miller's clothes were clearly different from when he left that morning, I didn't say anything. Where did you go? Carol Miller asked. Something urgent came up at the company. I went to take care of it. Didn't Sadie tell you? Robert Miller glanced at me, probably waiting for me to speak up for him. I took a sip of tea and remained silent. Slap. Mom, what are you doing? Seeing Carol Miller hit Robert Miller, I raised my eyebrows. Still lying. Tell me, are you having an affair? Robert Miller quickly glanced at me, and I didn't miss the flicker of panic in his eyes. Mom, what are you talking about? I know you don't like Sadie, but she's my wife. How can you spread rumors about me in front of her? It was fortunate Carol Miller didn't know about technologies like Photoshop. Otherwise, if she heard her son's earnest words, she would definitely question the authenticity of the photos she saw. How did I raise you from childhood? I can't believe it. You're just like your father who died early. Neither of you are good people. Seeing Carol Miller shed tears, I actually felt a little uneasy. I knew that as soon as I presented the evidence to her, Carol Miller would erupt. After all, she was a victim of being the unwitting mistress herself back then. Carol Miller definitely couldn't accept that her son was someone like his father. But seeing her genuinely distressed by the truth, I felt a pang of reluctance. Mom, did someone say something to you? You have to believe me. How could I do something like this? Lost in her emotions, Carol Miller ignored this remark. Robert Miller turned his gaze to me. Sadie, has someone been gossiping to you? Believe me, I would never betray you. If David Chin hadn't warned me, I really wouldn't have thought Robert Miller would have the guts to cheat. I only found out after we got married. Robert Miller was a mama's boy. It wasn't easy for Carol Miller to raise him alone. So, most of the time, as long as Carol Miller wasn't too unreasonable, I would yield to her. I tried my best not to conflict with her. But occasionally, when Carol Miller felt Robert Miller treated me better than her, she would act up. She would find fault with me from every angle. Robert Miller's background and Carol Miller's past. Robert Miller told me about them when I was extremely angry. At that time, he said, Sadie, I know you've been wronged. My mom hasn't had many good days in her life, and I know her dependence on me is too strong, but I can't just ignore her. Please, for my sake, don't take it personally. We had a good relationship then, and I didn't want to divorce Robert Miller over some baseless issues. But I never expected that my repeated concessions would lead to Robert Miller's betrayal. Let's divorce. I know about you and Ashley Davis. After confirming Robert Miller's affair, I had planned to propose divorce. But at that time, my relationship with David Chin wasn't entirely innocent either. Last month, Robert Miller went overseas on a business trip. David Chin used the excuse that he was sick and tricked me into going to his place. Although nothing substantial happened in the end, I felt inexplicably guilty, and that's why I had been hesitant about the divorce agreement. I was trying to figure out how our assets should be divided. If David Chin hadn't been pushing so hard, and if Robert Miller hadn't brought Ashley Davis home yesterday, I would have planned to bring up the divorce later. Sadie, listen to me, my relationship with Ashley Davis isn't what you think. People who cheat say similar things when defending themselves. I wasn't interested in hearing Robert Miller's excuses. I played the recording I had sent to the lawyer yesterday. I adjusted the progress roughly and then turned up the volume. Robert, since you no longer have feelings for Sarah, why don't you divorce her? We signed a prenuptial agreement when we got married. The at-fault party leaves with nothing. The company has developed well over the years, and I don't want Sarah to take all my hard work, so I can only inconvenience you. Yesterday, when I was about to pause the recording, I happened to hear Ashley Davis ask this question. I was also curious how Robert Miller would answer. Unexpectedly, Robert Miller, who had always seemed somewhat innocent before I discovered his affair, would say something so realistic. How did you? Maybe fate just didn't approve of you bringing your mistress home on a holiday. That's why I, who usually sleeps soundly, suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and happened to hear your true thoughts. I don't know if Robert Miller was too confident, or if he was just caught up in the moment and didn't care about anything else. It was truly foolish of him to say such things at home. You signed an agreement? What agreement? Carol Miller suddenly interjected. Exchanging a glance with Robert Miller, and seeing that he had no intention of explaining, I said, you also know that when I married Robert Miller, I was marrying down, so my dad wasn't comfortable marrying me off to him. Robert Miller voluntarily suggested signing a marriage agreement. Looking BA. I should thank him for having that idea at the time. At that time, Robert Miller truly loved me. so he didn't believe he would ever make a mistake. But who knew that his confidence back then would give me a chance to get some satisfaction? I don't agree. You can get divorced, but you can't take all my son's money. Actually, I understood Carol Miller. For her, it didn't matter who Robert Miller married. She wouldn't like anyone anyway. Since Robert Miller and I hadn't had children after many years of marriage, Carol Miller might have long wanted to find an excuse for Robert Miller to divorce me. But she didn't expect the prenuptial agreement complication between Robert Miller and me. Of course I won't take all his money. How much he owned before marriage is written in writing, and that still belongs to him. I won't take a cent. If it weren't for the situation with David Chin, I would definitely have made Robert Miller pay a greater price. But now, since I myself wasn't entirely blameless, I could only be lenient. Hearing this, Carol Miller still wanted to say something, but I held up my phone. You've always bragged about raising a good son. You definitely wouldn't want his affair to become public knowledge, right? Divorce is draining for anyone. Even when I found out Robert Miller was cheating, I realized I didn't love him as much as I thought. At this moment, I also had to say the most practical things for my own interests. Carol Miller was choked by my words, her face looking terribly unpleasant. Sadie, I was wrong. Can we not divorce? Robert Miller's eyes were red. I didn't know why he was suddenly being so emotional at this moment. He was the one who brought his mistress back to our marital home and couldn't wait to be intimate with her while I was asleep. He was the one who said he hadn't loved me for a long time. But now, he was also the one asking me to stay. If you want to keep some dignity, just make it quick. You would have expected this day when you first cheated. As I left, seeing Carol Miller sitting there in a daze, I felt a little melancholy. If she hadn't gone through all that back then, perhaps she would have had more confidence when arguing with me. Robert Miller's father had concealed his married status and seduced Carol Miller when she was still a student. After Carol Miller became pregnant, the man promised to marry her. This was why Carol Miller insisted on keeping the child, even breaking ties with her family. But who knew, when the child was close to being born, the man disappeared. An undergraduate student who hadn't even graduated, with a newborn child. In that era, one can imagine how much gossip and rumors Carol Miller endured. Robert Miller's father's wife, who somehow found out about Carol Miller's existence, hired people to spread rumors that Carol Miller had broken up her family. Carol Miller almost killed herself and Robert Miller. Perhaps that's when it started. Carol Miller became especially sensitive to mistresses and affairs. She detested the labels placed upon her. But she was powerless. She could only fight to live and raise Robert Miller to adulthood. Perhaps she never imagined that the son she had always been so proud of would become the kind of person she hated the most. David Chen's car was still parked there. I didn't know if Robert Miller had noticed him when he arrived. What's wrong? After getting into the car, David Chen saw that I was emotional and asked. I just cleared things up with them. In a week, Robert Miller and I are going to the courthouse. On the way back, looking at the festive holiday atmosphere along the roadside, my throat felt sore. Didn't your family make you go back for the holiday? Not wanting to burst into tears for no reason, I initiated a topic. No. For years, I haven't married or dated. My mom suspects I like men. She's afraid I'll end up alone, so she's been trying to set up Atesh for me. I couldn't stand it anymore and ran back. David Chin, Robert Miller, and I were university classmates. David Chin was even Robert Miller's roommate. Actually, David Chin was the one who confessed to me first. But I knew his family was preparing to move overseas. Considering everything, I felt he wasn't a good match for me and rejected him. Robert Miller didn't know David Chin liked me too. When he confessed to me, he said a lot of silly things. I thought he was naive and only agreed after careful consideration. Perhaps because my parents' marriage was a strategic marriage, from childhood, I hardly felt much warmth at home. My parents did everything expected of parents, as if completing a task. I never lacked money. But they wouldn't care if I was happy. Nor would they care who I hung out with. When I found out Robert Miller was from a single-parent family, I was quite surprised. Because he was very thoughtful and had strong empathy. He could sense my every emotional change in time. That alone was enough for me to fall in love with him. It could be said that Robert Miller's appearance filled the emotional void of my past 20 years. So, we naturally got married after graduation. When my dad was worried I wouldn't be happy marrying Robert Miller, and Robert Miller voluntarily brought up signing a marriage agreement, I even thought, for a while, that I had found a good partner. But the truth is, our relationship ultimately succumbed to reality. I thought Robert Miller would always protect me. But when Carol Miller and I argued, he almost always sided with his mom. My expectations of him disappeared bit by bit as I kept trying to understand him. His love for me might also have been worn away, little by little, through the confrontations between Carol Miller and me. It was inevitable that we would reach this point of divorce. But ultimately, it was for an undignified reason. Before you get divorced, I won't look for you. Just T. Oh, avoid giving Robert Miller any leverage. I wasn't surprised at all that David Chin would say this. He had always been very goal-oriented. When he first returned to the country, he might not have had any specific plans. He just wanted to see how I was doing. Who knew he would discover the rift between Robert Miller and me, and it also gave him leverage over Robert Miller. The house Robert Miller and I lived in now was bought by Robert Miller when we got married. Since he had already brought someone back, I wouldn't want this house either. Thinking Robert Miller wouldn't return from the family estate anytime soon, I asked Elena to help me start packing my things. Sarah, are you really divorcing the mister? Elena was a cook my dad specifically found for me. She knew about my situation with David Chin, but she was very discreet, and I didn't hide much from her. Yes. He brought someone back. I can't just pretend not to see it. Seeing Elena look thoughtful, I thought she was worried about losing her job. You'll come with me then. I'm used to your cooking. Don't worry about your job. Elena smiled. Sarah, I'm not worried about that. I was just thinking, why would the mister be so bold? He doesn't seem like that kind of person. What Elena said was also what I found strange. It seemed I wasn't the only one who thought Robert Miller didn't have the nerve. But he did bring someone back. And he was intimate with her just a wall away from me. Thinking about it, I sent a message to the private investigator who had followed Robert Miller before. Are you working? If you're taking cases, can you help me look into someone else? Elena and I packed for nearly an hour before I received a reply from the other side. Yes, but the price has increased after the holiday. I transferred the money to him. Along with that, I sent him the name and basic information of the person I wanted him to investigate. When I got into university, my parents each gave me a villa. After packing the things I wanted to take, I found a car. I was preparing to go to the house that was farther away. As I was about to get in the car, Robert Miller returned. Sadie, where are you going? There was another slap mark on Robert Miller's face. It seemed Carol Miller had hit him again. You've already brought someone back. Continuing to live here feels disgusting. Robert Miller's face changed. I'm sorry. I waved my hand, not wanting to hear his excuses. Remember the agreed time. For the sake of our past, let's part ways amicably. Seeing Robert Miller nod in agreement, I turned and left. After I got married, my parents seemed to have completed their life's goals. They went their separate ways. These years, my mom had been traveling overseas. My dad also hired a professional manager to handle the family company. He himself bought a property by the coast to grow fruit. The three of us didn't contact each other much normally. Afraid of upsetting them, I planned to tell them about my divorce after I got the divorce papers. Suddenly being alone, I felt the days were a bit hard to bear. A few days later, the private investigator sent me a video. It came with a message below it. What's your relationship with this man? Be careful around him. I pressed play. Watching the video of David Chin and Ashley Davis sitting opposite each other, I was silent for a long time. It wasn't that I suspected David Chin from the beginning. The timing of his return was very coincidental. At that time, Robert Miller and I were at a stalemate because Carol Miller was being unreasonable. Robert Miller kept making excuses about having things at the company and came home very late. Later, claiming he didn't want to disturb my sleep, he moved into one of the guest rooms. When I noticed the house next door had changed owners, David Chin had already moved in 3 days prior. The balcony of our master bedroom faced the balcony next door. That day, I couldn't sleep and stood on the balcony for air in the middle of the night. I saw a man across the way, wearing a bathrobe and drinking. The more I looked, the more familiar the man seemed. It wasn't until the next day, after Robert Miller had left for work, that David Chin rang the doorbell. Only then did I confirm it was really him. Even now, David Chin hadn't let Robert Miller find out he lived next door. My suspicion about David Chen's impure motives arose because his personality was too different from the person I remembered. David Chin was also a privileged young man raised with a silver spoon. He was organized, knew when to advance and retreat, and understood boundaries. But regarding the matter of urging me to divorce Robert Miller, he seemed too impatient. I was bound by a sense of morality and absolutely wouldn't cross the final line. But the truth was, the distance between David Chin and me had already crossed the red line. This was something Robert Miller didn't know. If he knew, getting a divorce wouldn't be so easy. I knew when Ashley Davis was hired by the company. At first, Robert Miller mentioned her with some exasperation. He said Ashley Davis was too naive and he didn't know why HR would hire someone like her to be his assistant. Robert Miller was a boss who treated his employees fairly well. He wasn't the type to casually fire people. So even if Ashley Davis didn't meet his requirements for an assistant, he had the senior employees help train her. He hadn't asked HR to transfer her to another department. When David Chin showed me the intimate photos of Ashley Davis and Robert Miller, I was surprised. Because I didn't immediately recognize the woman Robert Miller was holding. Ashley Davis looked too different from how I had seen her before. In just a few months, she seemed to have matured all of a sudden. She had become very womanly. At that time, I doubted the authenticity of the photos, so I hired someone to investigate Robert Miller myself. The facts proved that David Chin hadn't lied to me. Robert Miller was cheating. But Elena's words reminded me again. Robert Miller and I had been married for 5 years. How did he suddenly become like this? After much thought, the only variable in my life was David Chin. So, I asked the private investigator to look into him. Sure enough, David Chin and Ashley Davis were connected. I watched the video over and over again. The way they looked at each other and smiled in the video, it didn't look like they had just met. Thinking of something, I sent a message to the private investigator. Can you investigate information from overseas? The reply was quick. Yes, it's more expensive. Do you want me to? I didn't hesitate and immediately transferred a sum of money. Yes, investigate thoroughly. Let me know if it's not enough money. It wasn't that I had money to burn. It was just that I couldn't stand being played. Divorcing Robert Miller did hurt me. But this was the path I chose myself. I accepted the outcome. What I couldn't accept was someone else having already decided the direction I should take. No matter who they were, or what their reason was. Although David Chin hadn't sought me out these past few days, he had been messaging me constantly. To prevent him from noticing anything unusual, I acted as affectionately as before. The day before the divorce, Carol Miller called me. I have one request. After you're divorced, delete everything you have on Robert Miller. From now on, we go our separate ways and stay out of each other's lives. I had expected her to bring up the prenuptial agreement between Robert Miller and me again. But she hung up after saying that. Speaking of which, my feelings about Carol Miller were complex. She was once the biggest obstacle and challenge in my marriage with Robert Miller. But that was just her personality. Now, to protect her and Robert Miller's reputation, she was willing to give up significant interests. It must have been difficult for her. Robert Miller hadn't contacted me these past few days. Perhaps Carol Miller had something to do with that too. I should thank her. Before going to bed, the private investigator sent me a screenshot from a foreign social media platform. It had a photo of David Chin and a message in English. Translated, it meant, David Chin lost his money gambling and left all his valuables there. I checked the publication date of this post. It was 6 months ago. Once a person gets hooked on gambling, ruin is almost certain to follow. This also applies to wealthy people. Because they've never known hardship and have no concept of money, kids from rich families who get addicted to gambling will play even more recklessly than ordinary people. I could hardly imagine the once distinguished David Chin becoming this kind of person. In the photo, his expression was distorted, his eyes bloodshot. You could tell the adrenaline from gambling hadn't worn off yet. So, the truth behind his sudden return back home might be that his family found out about his gambling and kicked him out. And somehow, he remembered me. That's why he was urging me to divorce quickly. David Chin had said before that once Robert Miller and I got our marriage certificate, he would propose to me immediately. Now it seemed he was eager to get his hands on the money in my name. I tossed and turned all night. When I appeared at the courthouse entrance with dark circles under my eyes, Robert Miller misunderstood. Sadie, you never used to have trouble sleeping. Are you resentful of me? Robert Miller also looked a bit more haggard after not seeing him for a few days. I didn't know what deal Ashley Davis and David Chin had made. Or perhaps, Robert Miller was also one of David Chin's targets. Thinking of the time when Robert Miller and I were deeply in love, I hesitated for a few seconds and asked, "How are you and Ashley Davis doing?" Our divorce process had gone too smoothly. Now that it was almost over, I suddenly felt a little panicked. He didn't expect me to ask such a question. Robert Miller hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "Pretty good. My mom wants me to bring her back." I parted my lips, but remembering I didn't have concrete evidence yet, I swallowed my words. "That's good. You have a bit of an age gap. Don't marry her too quickly." That was all the warning I could give. Because of the prenuptial agreement, our divorce process went very quickly. As I came out with the divorce papers, Robert Miller called out to me, "Sadie, can we still be friends?" Before I knew Ashley Davis might have been a honey trap set up by David Chin to seduce Robert Miller, I resented Robert Miller. But now, I only felt a sense of melancholy. We'll see. You never know what the future holds. After getting the divorce papers, I took a taxi directly to the airport. Yesterday, after figuring out David Chen's reason for approaching me, I booked a plane ticket to go see my mom. At security check, David Chen sent me a message. "Are you done? Do you need me to pick you up?" I didn't reply and just turned off my phone. When my mom found out I came to see her by myself, she looked puzzled. "Did that mother-in-law of yours agree to let you leave Robert Miller and come here to travel by yourself?" I took the divorce papers out of my bag and held them up in front of her. "I just divorced Robert Miller before I came. Carol Miller won't be able to control me anymore." She examined the divorce papers over and over again. Then, my mom slapped my head with the divorce papers. "How could you get divorced, such a big thing, without discussing it with us first? Are you all grown up now?" My mom was a bit angry, but I didn't take it seriously. I knew she was just talking. "It's done. We haven't seen each other in a long time. Be nice to me." Hearing this, my mom's expression couldn't hold. She let out a little laugh. "Fine. Look at how Carol Miller has worn you down. I should have listened to your dad back then. You shouldn't marry into a single-parent family." Because my bank card from back home couldn't be used here, I hadn't even turned on my phone for several days. When I remembered to charge my phone, I saw hundreds of missed calls and messages on it. Almost all of them were from David Chin. Watching his messages go from initial concern to later irritability, and finally to curses, my heart sank. Just then, he called again. When I answered, he was still a bit surprised. After a few seconds, he spoke. "Where are you? Why haven't you been answering my calls?" David Chin must have realized I knew about his plan. So when he spoke to me, his voice had no warmth. It was as if I were a stranger to him. "I'm not going to tell you. Don't try anything with me anymore." Hearing the sound of him lighting a cigarette on the other end, my eyes ached. He had acted so well in front of me before. I hadn't discovered it at all. If I hadn't had the private investigator look into him, I couldn't imagine what would have awaited me. "When did you find out?" I had fallen for Robert Miller because of his attentiveness. After discovering Robert Miller's affair, feeling lost and helpless, it was natural for me to develop feelings for David Chin, who was there for me. Wiping away the tears that spilled from my eyes, I said without a hint of emotion in my voice, the day I told Robert Miller about the divorce. There was a long silence on the other end. After a moment, David Chin chuckled softly. I thought I put on a pretty good performance. How did you find out? Of course, I wouldn't tell him that Elena's words had given me a hint. Quit gambling. It's not a good thing. You're still young. Although David Chin was the one who ultimately led to my divorce, a fly doesn't land on a seamless egg. I would. And be pointlessly angry at David Chin because of this. Moreover, he hadn't caused me any substantial harm. For the sake of everything in the past, I wanted to persuade him to pull himself out while there was still time. It's probably for the best that you're gone. You won't believe me now, but I truly never got married. And when I saw you again, I realized I still liked you. After that phone call, David Chin and I lost contact. He blocked all my contact methods. According to Elena, the house next door had new owners again. The private investigator sent me more photos of David Chin and Ashley Davis meeting. Carol Miller hadn't deleted my contact information. When I saw her social media feed saying her daughter-in-law was pregnant and she was becoming a grandmother, I packaged these photos and sent them to Robert Miller. Ashley Davis was part of a honey trap set up for you. Be careful not to be tricked out of everything you have. Robert Miller didn't reply to my message. I didn't know what he was thinking, but I had done what I needed to do. How he chose was up to him. After staying with my mom for a month, she found me annoying and wanted to send me back home. Go find your dad. I heard he's grown a new type of fruit. Go back and taste it first. If it's good, I'll come back too. This was how my dad and mom got along. They weren't divorced, and neither of them had anyone else. But they just couldn't live together well. I used to find this way of life unacceptable. Now that I think about it, everyone makes different choices, and as long as they're happy, that's what matters. When my dad found out I was divorced, he was silent for a long time. Because he spent so much time in the orchard, he, who had once lived a life of luxury, looked like he had aged. His hair was white, and his face had many wrinkles. I stared at him for a long time. If you're divorced, you're divorced. You can live life with someone or by yourself. Anyway, you do. And have children, so live however you want. Hearing these words, I hugged my dad tightly, ignoring the sweat on him. Dad, thank you. Hey, quickly let go of me, it's hot. He pushed me away and got up, ready to go back. A few days later, I received a message from Robert Miller. I confronted Ashley Davis. She said someone put her up to it, just so she could marry me and find a way to trick me out of my money. Thank you for warning me, and I'm sorry. I haven't figured out how I want to live my life from now on. But living like this, spending some time separately with my parents, and then traveling around by myself, seems pretty good. End of story.